welcome to our Press Play webinar series. This is presentation number 2 for the year, and we are so excited to have Professor Susan Hespos from Mark's Baby Lab. Today we're going to be learning about what babies and young children know and how we know it. So welcome everybody, get comfortable. We're in for a great 45 an hour presentation, hour and a half. Okay. So I'll start by an acknowledgement of country. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the countries we are all meeting on today and recognise their continuing connection to the land and waters. We pay respect to all our First Nations people who are present here today, and I just hope everyone has a great webinar. I'd like to first also introduce our speaker. We're so delighted and privileged to have Professor Susan Hespos with us today. She is a developmental psychologist and is on a mission to show that babies think before they speak. She runs Baby Lab, the foremost infant research laboratory in Australia that conducts research with infants and children focusing on language acquisition, cognitive development, and learning. Historically, it was thought that infants are born with a relatively blank slate and knowledge is constructed through interactions between the infant and the environment. In this approach, the task for the young infant is to construct reality by gaining experience. But Professor Hespos champions a different position in her work called core knowledge. The key tenet of this approach is that underneath all the things that vary across humans, there exists a set of perceptual and conceptual capacities that are common. So I hope that sets the scene. Oh, no, we're not done. I hope that sets the scene for everybody. And I am going to hand it over to Professor Susan Hespos.
Hello, and thank you for the lovely introduction. We hope that this is an interactive webinar. Part of the reason that we're trying this sort of new format is we are here to share what we know about baby science with you. And by definition, you're probably or potentially a sleep-deprived parent, somebody who's super busy, somebody who doesn't want to sit down for a lecture. And so in working with the people that work in our lab here, one of the people that works here is a mother of 2 young children. And she said, Sue, I can't sit still for a lecture. I want you to make it more interactive. And so that's what we're trying out today. So here's a shot at interactive. If those of you are not driving, then if you could put into the chat window maybe the ages of your children, just numbers, so that we can get a sense of who you are and what age your kids are. And we're going to tailor this towards you. So please ask questions. I've got a couple of people helping me here, and they're going to interrupt at various times. So when you have a question, please ask it in the chat window, and we'll get to them if we can. I'm not in charge of that part. I'm relying on my friends. So I'm happy to answer any questions. And what I'm going to be talking about today, first let me tell you a little bit about me. If you can't tell already, I'm from the United States. And I have come to Australia about 4 years ago to run the Baby Lab at Western Sydney University. We are funded by government grants to do research on typical development. And so we run research every day on kids younger than 5 years of age. At various times, we've got various studies going on, and we encourage any of you to participate in our studies. We have locations in Bankstown and in Westmead and in Kingswood, you can sign up online to participate in our studies. And when we have an age that's right for your, when we have a study that's in the age group that you have a child in, we'll reach out and see if you want to come in. No commitments, but we do pay $30. We give you a small gift, and we tell you about the science that we're doing that we're going to be talking about today. So without further ado, let's get started. I have a little bit of an agenda to start with some examples of what we know about babies, then go to toddlers, and then go to preschoolers. But I can jump around and answer any questions you might have. What's the data on what age groups we're talking?
Yeah. So Sue, we have a range from 10 weeks all the way up to 4, 5, 7, 10, 10 and 12-year-olds even. But we've got as young as 10 weeks, 1.5 years old, 10-month-old. So a real range.
Great, great. So the great thing about babies is that they don't stay 10 weeks for long. They keep getting older. And so some of this will be future stuff for you, and some of it will remind you of what it was when your kids were smaller. So starting off with babies. Babies can hear in the last trimester while they're still in the womb. Once they come out, their auditory abilities are pretty similar, pretty mature. And so talk to your babies. What is interesting about what we do as parents is we do something called infant-directed speech, which is a baby talk. It is a way of talking that you only do to an infant. And it sounds ridiculous if you were to do it to another adult. And so it tends to be like, hello, baby. So you have a ridiculous intonation, a lot of change in the range of the loudness as well as sort of the sounds. And we emphasize, even without having like a training in linguistics, we simplify our language. We use short sentences, and the grammar is simple. And what's kind of cool is nobody ever taught you how to do this. Some people just do it naturally. It varies by culture. So if you're not somebody who does infant-directed speech, that's okay. Kids learn language without infant-directed speech. But when we study infant-directed speech, we find that it is tailored to exactly what the kids need to learn at that certain age. And so that's kind of fun. So you can say something to a kid like, oh, here's a really cool toy. Look at that toy. It's green. Can you see the toy? You might hand it to the kid if they're at an age where they can grab it and things like that. It is a monologue. For the first several months of life, kids are not talking back. And we encourage them to do eye contact during this. We ask them questions and then we pause and we kind of wait for them to answer. And why? Why are we doing this? Well, it turns out that speaking takes practice. And there's all these rules that you and I have automated for years. And we don't realize that babies have to learn this. So most conversations, except for the one where I'm talking at a camera right now, is I talk, I pause, you talk, and then I pause. So it's this back and forth. And kids learn. It's called a burst pause. And kids learn when you're talking to them, even when they're not producing language, you pause every once in a while and then they make a noise and you're like, that's great. And then you capitalize on what it is and they become a partner in the conversation. So it's sort of a complex dance that gets developed from the first days of life. Some of the other things that are, so what do we do research on? We have done research on finding out that people vary their intonation, simplify their grammar when they're doing infant-directed speech. We've also learned that kids drive the conversation sometimes. So what's really great, and many of you may remember this from when your kids were in the first weeks of life, they look at you when they're interested. And the moment they get bored, they look away. And so we as adults take that as cues of more of what, if they're looking at you and they're interested, we keep going. And when they look away, you change. You take that as feedback and you adjust and change the topic, change the intonation, change what you're focusing on, those kinds of things. So our studies show that, like I remember as a parent, my son is grown now, but it was like I was a crazy person, right? I would be running this monologue, telling my kid as I'm going through the grocery store, well, now we have to go buy paper towels, and where are the apples? And, oh, I almost forgot to buy milk. I never expected him to take part in this conversation. What?
Too big.
Oh, okay. I never expected my son to take part in this conversation, but I was implicitly training him on this burst pause, turn-taking thing, because I would look at him, I would react to him, and then also there's so much for the babies to pick up on in those first months, years of life. They need a lot of exposure. So if you include them in the conversation, they're picking stuff up all the time. And we've seen studies where if you label something multiple times, you say, oh, look, here's a duck. Look at this. This is a duck. It's a yellow one. Oh, look at this one. It's a green duck. It looks kind of the same, but it's a little bit different. Oh, here's a red duck. See that one? Look at him. Look, all of them are on the lake together. And you have these kinds of conversations. What you're actually doing is repeating a word over and over and over again, like the word duck, and the kids are picking up on that. And our studies show that even with as short as 8 examples of saying the word duck, the kid will learn that label. So it's never too early to start getting language development started. Label things that are in your environment, get the collective monologue going along, and kids are learning. The reason we're impelled to do these kinds of things is kids need this information, and they're acquiring knowledge even though they can't be a conversational partner just yet. So continue doing those things. Are there any questions coming in? If people have questions about this, please start putting them in the chat window. One of the questions that we often get is, what about bilingualism? Particularly in the western suburbs of Sydney, there's many families that are growing up with multiple languages, 1, 2, 4. Sometimes it's a language that's only spoken when grandparents are in town. Sometimes it's a language that is spoken at home, and then they hear English when they go out. A variety of things can happen. And one thing that is absolutely clear, and Baby Lab has done a major amount of this research, is showing that multiple languages are good. There's advantages conferred by being multilingual. There's no need to worry about whether or not you're going to confuse your child. It doesn't delay their speech development. In fact, it's correlated with better perspective taking skills, increased socialization. There's nothing bad about speaking multiple languages at home. So this is a common question that we get. Let me move on to a couple of other things. One more thing. When you are labeling all of these things for your kids, there are certain environments that make it more likely that the kid is going to learn the word. So do not do flashcards. Please don't do flashcards. What gets kids more likely to acquire new vocabulary is if the parent or caretaker follows in on what the kid is already attending to, okay? So if the kid is sitting here looking at the red duck, and the parent comes in and sees that they're looking at it, they don't redirect their attention. They go, oh, I see you're looking at the duck. That's a red duck. Do you like the red duck? And the kid, when you ask a question and go up at the end, the kid might look at you and say, huh? To sort of get more cues of what it is that you're talking about. But if you can follow in so that the kid is attending to something and you're attending to it, it's called joint attention. And labeling that happens during a joint attention episode is the situation that's most likely to get kids to acquire new words. This is more around the age when they've started producing words. You don't have to do this at 2 months of age, but around about 12 months, 18 months, when kids are really starting to come up with a whole lot of words. If you follow in on what they're attending to and label it and talk about it, the kid is more likely to learn that word in that context. There's huge individual differences in terms of when kids acquire language. On average, its first words emerge around a year. If they're in multilingual environments, it's going to how much exposure they get to the different languages is going to influence which words they're saying first. But labeling objects in a joint attention episode is a great way to sort of boost vocabulary. There's also maturational differences. Some kids talk early, some kids talk late. I'm not a general practitioner. I'm not giving pediatric advice on that, but there is a range of what is normal in terms of when kids start producing language. Okay, other things that I want to talk about. Yes. Oh, good. Let's have questions.
So I read one of them.
Sorry, I realized I was on mute. Okay, a couple of questions have come through. So both around sort of a bit around bilingualism. So I've noticed that my daughter avoids speaking. She's 1 year old and is good with sign language. She only says things like upper when we're not looking. So how can we encourage her to speak more? I speak Spanish with her and the rest of the family speak English. And there's also another question around what strategies is best to use while exposing kids to multiple languages. For
Great.
example, speaking one language at home and another outside, or dad speak one and mum speak one, etc.
Yep, fantastic questions. So keep the questions coming. Every kid is different in terms, and every family is different. So whatever you can do to expose your kid consistently to the two languages, in this case, that you want them to learn is great. It turns out that kids don't need to have like exactly 50%, 50%. They actually, as long as you have 20% of the minority language, there's the majority language and the minority one, as long as there's 20% of the language that's being spoke less often, they should develop perfectly fine vocabulary in that language. So I'm saying this to try to reduce the pressure on parents that like they have to speak this many hours a day in English and then this many hours a day in Spanish. Don't sweat it. What tends to work in terms of research is when you can do it consistently. So one language in the house, and then if the majority, if you're growing up in Sydney and the majority language outside the house is English, try to speak Spanish in the house, or one parent that speaks a heritage language and then the rest of the household. Those are both situations that tend to have natively bilingual children produced in the long run. There's huge variation in this as well. Kids comprehend before they produce. So they may understand Spanish and not want to produce it until they're in a situation that they want to use it. So my personal example was that I spoke Spanish to my son. I wasn't very consistent about it because Spanish is my second language. But when he was young, whenever we were in the car, I spoke Spanish. That's what we did. And I was consistent about it for a long time. And there were times when he would speak Spanish to me, but he had to be in a good mood and it had to be on his terms. Then we went on a vacation and it was a Spanish-speaking country. And he had an opportunity to go hang out with a bunch of kids that were speaking Spanish. And I was thrilled. And he went, and all of a sudden, he started producing more Spanish than I have ever heard in the first 3-4 years of his life. So it has to be a socially motivating situation that if it's grandma and grandpa and they love talking to them in that language, great. Whatever it is that you can do to make it fun for the kid. Other kids playing soccer was what did it for my son. And I just tried to foster those situations. So whatever you can do, stick to a consistent method. Don't expect them to answer you unless they want to, but they're still comprehending, and comprehension will eventually lead to production. And honestly, it was when my son was 20 and living in Spain for a study abroad program. And he's like, by the way, thanks for speaking Spanish to me. I was like, so I waited 20 years to get the thank you. It's a little bit of a thankless task, but stick to it and try to create situations where it's positive for the kid to speak the other language. And there's a variety of ways to do that. So whatever works for your family is what's important. There's no hard and fast rules on this. What was the second question? There was Spanish.
And which strategy is best to use while exposing the kids to multiple languages? Example, speaking one language at home?
Yeah, whatever works for your family at that time. And kids are flexible. So do whatever works for your particular family. If you are really organized and you do it in certain settings, if there's certain people that speak one language but not the other one, try to expose your kid to them more often. It doesn't really matter. 20% of the time is enough. And it can be 20% like 2 months of the year, or it can be like 20% like a half an hour a day, something like that. Did I answer the other two questions? That's the question.
I've noticed that my daughter avoids speaking. She's 1 year old and is good with sign languages. She only says things like,
got it. Thank you for bringing me back to the one with sign language. Sign language is a language. She's talking. And so it is for every additional language. So on average, again, averages vary a lot. That doesn't predict that your kid's going to speak their first word. But on average, first word emerges around a year. However, if the kid is growing up in a multilingual environment, sometimes it's delayed as much. The average is 14 months, 2 months later. Now, is that a delay? Not really. The kid's being exposed to 2 different sound systems, 2 different languages, 2 different grammars. Give them 2 more months. And so if they're being exposed to multiple languages, and count sign language as a language, it is, then it might be after a year. And again, huge individual differences in when kids say their first words. And the more languages they're exposed to, the more they might listen before they start producing. So don't worry that they're not doing it. And sign language is an interesting case because spoken languages require that your tongue and your lips coordinate in the right way. And motorically, this takes a while to develop. But sign language is relying on hands, and gestures are often easier. Some sign language gestures are easier to do around, earlier in development, like 6 months, 7 months, things like that. So some of you may have heard of something called baby sign, and these are loosely Oz language or American Sign Language based gestures that even if you're not going to do full-on sign language training with your child, they can learn certain gestures earlier. And so baby signing is a way of getting kids to communicate with gestures before their lips and tongues are coordinating to have the motoric ability to produce recognizable sounds. I hope that makes sense. So comprehension happens before production. If they are doing eye contact or they seem to be understanding what you're saying, they look at what you refer to, things like that, they are well on their way to language development. And 12 months is still very early for having multiple words. So take some time with it, and they'll surprise you. More questions?
Someone suggested media exposure.
I'm just going to say this one out loud so everyone can hear it as well.
Great.
There's a question around babies babbling and sounds, learning speech, and should I mimic the babbles?
Yep. This is all the beginning of language learning. So full-on words don't usually come out first. There's a whole bunch of babble. Babble is really cool because the babble is practicing the sounds of the languages that they're hearing. So if you have a kid that's growing up in a French-speaking environment versus a kid growing up in a German-speaking environment, their babble actually differentiates around about 4 or 5 months of age. So the French one will have more like trills and the R's and stuff like that, and they'll sound like the languages that they're coming from. And so one, this is just practice. Like I said, they have to get getting your lips and your tongue to coordinate with your aspirations, like how you're using your breath to enunciate your words, is a fine motor skill. And fine motor skills are only developing in the second half of the first year. So you can even see when a kid goes to pick something up, they kind of swipe at 5 or 6 months. They don't get a pincer grasp until like 7 or 8 months. Similarly, their tongue and their lips to coordinate to enunciate certain sounds also takes time to develop. So one of the great unfairnesses in life for female caretakers is that the word da, as in dada, comes in sooner. It's easier to enunciate before mama, because putting your lips together takes a certain more coordination than making them sound da. So in terms of producing words, dada usually comes in before mama. But that's all right. These are, just one of the things that are predicted in life. All right. More questions? Okay.
Actually, there is a second part to that question. Should the parent mimic the babble?
Oh, should the parent mimic the babble? Absolutely. If the kid, must you? No. Do whatever you feel is natural and take cues from your kid. So if they say da and you just go da, they will laugh. They will do eye contact. I mean, keep the game going. If you guys are having fun, do more of that. What's also really fun is that you can hear kids, like when they're having a quiet time in their crib or something like that, you can hear them just playing with their voice. And so you can try to interject and take turn taking like a conversation, or maybe they don't want to play that game. So There's absolutely nothing wrong with repeating. Imitation is one of the most powerful learning mechanisms that there are. You know, it's a lifelong thing, right? Like we imitate fashion that we like or dislike. Kids will imitate facial expressions. They'll imitate sounds that they hear. And this is one of the more fun games to play. One thing that's really, I think, underutilized in terms of games to play is try mirroring your child, right? Like have them sitting next to you and then sort of face them. Whatever they do, just copy them. And they will figure out pretty quickly, like, wait a minute, this is a game. And then they'll start moving their arms, and so you move your arms. It's a going back and forth kind of thing. It even works in front of a mirror. Very young children understand that reflection is them. They have the proprioceptive feel of I'm waving my arm, and oh my gosh, that thing in the mirror is waving its arm. You can put a mirror on the floor, put a 2-month-old baby on it, and they will have a ball. They sit there and they usually drool and spread it across the mirror. It's a little bit gross, but they also like looking at their own reflection. And so they like being able to feel their arm move and see that reflection move. So there's a bunch of fun games. Imitation is a powerful learning mechanism. There's a bunch of fun games that you can play with kids. You can imitate their sounds, their babble, but you can also imitate their motions. And then there's a great time where kids are mimicking your facial expressions, and it's a keen insight when you go, oh my gosh, is that what I look like? Because your kid's trying to mimic your smile and you're like, so imitation is great. Play with it, make it a game. It's just like peekaboo in a way, right? Like, so you say to the kid, you know, oh, where's the baby? Oh, there you are. And at first you're doing everything as a parent, right? You cover the kid, you uncover the kid, you act surprised, you're doing all parts of the game. But slowly, every parent kind of changes the challenge, right? So after you've done it a few times, if the kid's a little bit older, you throw the blanket over the kid and you wait for them to take the blanket off, right? And then you go, oh, you did it. And so again, all of these games that you play, kids do not know how much money you spent on a toy. Kids are not aware of the latest, greatest that's available in the market. They want your attention. They want to play with, you know, people around them. They like eye contact. Somebody said something about social media or screens, right? Somebody remind me of what the question was. Oh, audio and video. Oh, 2 things to say about that. But basically the idea is kids want to have interaction and contingency. They want to see you react to their conversational bids. They want to see you imitate them, and then they're going to imitate you, and then it becomes this feedback, you know, circle. But they also like this continuous challenge that's going up and up. There's times when you will be like, oh, I'm going to do this now, and like there's going to be a day that you put the blanket over the kid to play peekaboo, and that is just absolutely whatever the worst thing you could have done to your kid at that point in time. And they will let you know. And so react to the kid that you have that day. Sometimes they love a certain game, and the next day they won't even give it a look. So try to always up the challenge to where the kid's happy. Some days you'll overwhelm them. That's too bad. They'll survive. Some days you make them bored. So then you want to change it up a little bit. And so if you sort of meet your kid where they're at, you are going to become a developmental psychologist of sort, but you're going to be taking apart and watching how much they change and how much they learn every day and how that changes over time.
Can I just sort of cue you? That's quite a nice lead into a question we just had around what is the best environment for teaching language. Examples, stimulating rooms, distractions, time of day, use of dummies. Just all your comments around responding to the child you have. That sounds very much about the best environments. Yeah.
Yep. And for those of you who are bilingual, doing different things in different languages and sort of in repetition. So count the ducks in English and then count them in Spanish. This is going to help the kid learn numbers, as well as that there's different languages and different patterns in these languages. If you can buy the same book in 2 languages, That's a great one, because then the kid is going to see comparisons between the different books. And this is not going to be true in the first months and weeks of life, but it will over time. And that also brings me back to a really general comment, which is there's certain types of knowledge that just unfold. Kids learn how to sit up. Kids learn, well, posturally, they learn how to turn over usually first. Then they learn how to sit. Then they learn how to crawl. Then they learn how to walk. These things are all rate limited by a variety of factors. For example, big babies, they sit early. They have a low center of gravity. If the low center of gravity allows them to get their butt on the floor and hold their torso upright. Long, skinny babies, they don't sit so early. They kind of fall over more easily. And so they're kind of exploring the world more like this for longer. In some cultures, ours, they tell you to put your baby on the back to sleep. When you put a baby to sleep on their back, they do a bunch of leg lifts, okay? So they're spending a lot of time with their abs. And when you have a strong core like that, those are the muscles that babies need to learn how to stand. So because our medical culture says put babies on their back to sleep, therefore kids tend to get a strong lumbar area. These are the muscles that are important in walking. Some kids hate tummy time. So you get kids in our culture, and this is perfectly fine, that go from sitting to walking, and they completely miss the whole crawling stage. Is this a problem? Not really. And so, but this is a case where what I'm trying to demonstrate is that there's certain types of knowledge that just unfold. If you are growing at a normal rate, you learn how to turn over, you learn how to sit. Some of them learn how to crawl, then eventually walking, right? So these things kind of unfold, and we can encourage our kids to do these things. We can help support them by their hips so that they can have a sitting posture. We can, households that have pets or older siblings have kids that crawl earlier. Why? Because they're trying to chase their siblings or the dog or the cat or whatever is in your house. So there's social motivations that impose these things. And then, but in general, every kid is going to go through these postural milestones. So that's one type of knowledge that just unfolds. There's other type of knowledge which is trained by our culture, and that type of knowledge is much more laborious to acquire. So for example, in our culture, we think literacy and numeracy, knowing numbers, maths, is extremely important. This is not required. There are many cultures that are illiterate and don't have numbers that survive and thrive. However, our culture places a premium on these things. So you can live a perfectly fine life without having literacy. However, when you're in a culture where literacy is extremely important, it doesn't just take a couple of months to learn how to read. It takes years. Many years and so many trials. And so if you're encouraging your children to be numerate and literate, start early. So this is getting me to some of my props today. You can never start reading early enough. It sounds ridiculous to sit down with a book with a two-month-old, but it's not ridiculous. There's lots of books. What we have here is like a board book. You want to make it interesting to the child that you have that day. This is a board book for super young kids. Board books are great because the kids can chew on them. They can bend, they don't bend that much. But this one's also good for super young children because it's black and white. So black, white, and red are some of the earliest colors that kids can see in the first couple of months of life. And kids like looking at what they can see. So that's why these high contrast images are really good for kids. And there's a whole, just like in terms of learning language, we do that monologue long before they become a good conversational partner. Same thing with reading. There's a time to sit down and read, and they learn like, oh, I sit on somebody's lap and they put this thing in front of me and we turn pages, right? And then you'll find that after a while, the kid will grab the book by themselves and sit there and go, blah, 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 at their babbling stage, and they'll turn pages. They don't know yet that they're not actually reading, but they're showing you that they're picking up all of these sequences that you've done with them before. So buy lots of books, go to the library, get books, doesn't matter. Kids are not picky. Some books have high contrast for first 3-4 months of life when their vision is still very much developing. The world is blurry to a young infant, and their visual acuity gets pretty fully developed around 6 months. Other ones are tactile, right? So some of these books have like felt things in them and things that kids can scratch. This is sort of a book peekaboo game. There's a variety of these games, and find out what your kid likes and then try to do that more often. So books are great. You don't have to have a ton of books. It's more about the parent at a certain point so that you enjoy sitting down and looking at new books with your kid. They're going to be happy with whatever book. You could read them the same book over and over and over again. That's not really a deciding factor. Oh, I went on a tangent. Oh, that's right. It was this idea that there's certain things that unfold, and then there's other things that are really drilled into the kids. So reading time has to, number and letter recognition, sounding out words. It's going to take years, and it's a combination of a variety of things. Is there social pressure to do it? If you're growing up in Sydney, there's social pressure to be numerate and literate. Is there a supportive structure? You having reading time with your kid. Is there multilingualism going on? So it's really cool to go, uno, dos, tres, as well as 1, 2, 3 when you're counting things. And there's some really neat things about number development that we should go into, but I just want to pause and make sure we're not missing any questions.
There is one. It's about language development in a social context. So do you think that children who interact more with children of the same age develop language better than children who do not?
So the question is, do kids that grow up in a social context, like that talk to kids,
Interact with other children.
interact with other children? Oh, every variation under the sun is fine. So it depends on the kid that you have. There's no right or wrong answer to this. There are many cultures where kids that are many different ages grow up together. Our culture tends to put kids of the same age in the same school, day. Like, so, there's the infant room at the preschool. There's the toddler room. There's the preschooler room. It doesn't, kids learn and develop just fine in any of those situations. Some kids, you're not raising hundreds of kids, you're raising a few kids at most. And so it depends, you try to cater to what your kid likes best. One thing that is really fun is for kids to be around kids of similar age, because then they're learning, they're socially learning from other kids. Sometimes it's good for a kid to be around older kids so that they can look the older kid who's not an expert like an adult but is a little bit ahead of them. And then there's huge variation among kids too, right? So you can have all 4-year-olds, and some of them are really socially advanced, some of them are really motorically advanced. So there's always going to be a range. So figure out what your kid likes and try to follow in on that, and make them flexible, because the world is such that they're going to have to learn how to get along with kids of a variety of ages. There's developmental psychology theory. Piaget was a developmental psychologist who thought that there were sort of stages of development. And he had a large impact on how we set up our school system. So that's why there's first, second, third grade. Because Piaget thought you have to learn this in first grade, you have to learn this in second grade, you have to learn this in third grade. However, an equally strong competing theory is sort of the Montessori one, which is let the kids go at their own pace. So you can have a kid in primary school that is reading at a year 5 level, but their math skills are at a year 2 level. And again, there's advantages and disadvantages to both of these things. One is sort of letting the kid, advance very quickly if they're gifted in a certain area. However, there is also a necessity to get kids competent at a variety of, broad tasks, reading, arithmetic, things like that. So different schools cater to this, and different preschools do too, right? So do you bring a bunch of kids together do you separate them by age and ability? And there's advantages conferred by both situations. So there's no right or wrong answer to this question. Sorry, it's a complex answer, but it happens to be more representative of the truth. The problem is, if developmental psychology found that there was one right way to raise a kid, we would absolutely tell you. It is entirely clear from the science that we have so far that there's no single right path to development. And anybody that has multiple children already knows this. So sorry I can't give definitive answers, but I can give you the best that science has got at the moment.
Do you have a follow-up?
Oh, there's a follow-up question.
Would the recommendation be that children interacting with other children be better than children, especially if they're the lone child in the household being cared for by an adult, carer, parent, or grandparent?
Okay, so only child versus being around multiple kids. There's different skill sets involved in them. So exposing kids to multiple ones is great, but kids will develop just fine if they're the only kid in a household with multiple adults.
Children versus like the kid is around children more, or the parent with an adult. I think that's
Yeah, kids are really flexible learners. So even if you're growing up surrounded by adults, growing up with kids that are in your age, any variety is fine. Exposing kids, to multiple situations is great. The kids will react. There's different things that kids learn in these different social structures, right? So there are kids that are playing with other kids are going to be challenged in different ways. What I mean by that is that in a preschool classroom, around 2, when kids are sort of peaking in some of their aggressive tendencies, if you're growing up surrounded by adults, people don't steal your toys very often, right? But if you're growing up with siblings, they do rotten things sometimes, and they steal your toys, they hit you, they bite, they do a variety of these things. So obviously, if you're growing up with mostly adults, you're not going to get that kind of interaction style. But there's no hard and fast rule that like a kid must be exposed to similar age peers by such and such an age. There's a lot of variation in kids. Some kids prefer to be around adults. Some kids prefer to be around kids their age. So there's no right or wrong answer to this. Exposing kids to a variety will challenge them in different ways, and that's usually considered good. But also kids come to the table with their own personality, and so some kids may do better in an environment where they're surrounded by like similar age peers. Some might not. All right, what else is in my bag of tricks? There's lots. What we kind of wanted to show today was how there's a variety of things that can be done with toys, and what are some of the ways that you can demonstrate that your kid is learning all of the time. So the idea would be, this is one toy that I just found in the baby lab this morning. It's, so I think I said this before, but it bears repeating. Kids don't care how much money you spend on toys. You can play with the pots and pans in the kitchen. Those are cause-effect relationships that kids find fun, much like most of the toys that we do. So this is a cute one. It reminded me of when my kid was little. He was fascinated one day by a box of tissues. And I remember making the calculation of like, okay, how much does that box of tissues cost? Yeah, it's worth it to me to let him ruin this box of tissues, because he was picking them up and throwing them elsewhere. But it turns out that I must not have been the only parent that had this experience, because somebody's now made a toy about it, right? So instead of a box of tissues, these kids are going to be pulling these things out. The bummer is, imitation does generalize. So if you have this toy and you teach the kid to pull these things out, he may go to your tissue box next. So these are the burdens that we have. But what's great about this too is that there's toys that lend themselves to more than one way of playing with them. So each one of these pieces of tissue or fabric or whatever are similar in size, and they're a little bit transparent. And so there's a lot of different things. The toys that I find in developmental psychology we find are the best are the ones that don't constrain imagination, that don't constrain one particular way of playing with a toy, right? So you could make this kind of like a tissue box, but you could also, you know, look through these. You could talk about the colors. You could talk about that they're all squares. You can, there's other ways to play this game. There's ways to like get things out of the inside and put them in through shape sorting. Everything is a color and a nameable shape. This is great because, again, remember the joint attention idea? The kid is playing with that and you're like, look at that, it's red. Look at that, it's a circle. So it gives you that collective monologue thing when you're talking to your kid one way. Opportunities to name things and follow in on what they're attending to. They can also, you know, play with all of the insides in here and build things, right? And they can build it on top. They can do whatever they want with it. So things that aren't really constrained. So this is an example of a toy that can be played with different ways every time the kid's going after it. That can be constrained. That can be contrasted with, let's see, this one. Everybody has seen one of these before, but it is called an activity table, right? Now, what happens with these activity tables is that they have 20 things on them. But all 20 things are pretty much the same. The kid just sort of moves it or taps at it or scratches at it or flips it. And it can only be played with one way. This is one that we have in Baby Lab. So we buy some toys that are not so great sometimes. This one also usually comes with batteries that you could put in so that some of these things make noises every time that you hit them. Just because your child is making noise doesn't necessarily mean they're learning anything productive, right? So the best kind of interactions to have with a kid is people to people and a game where you're changing the challenge all of the time. These tasks where it's extremely repetitive in terms of the sounds that they make and the types of actions that they incur are not always going to be the best ones in terms of encouraging encouraging learning and changing and encouraging interactions with the kids that are going to get them more school ready, improve their vocabulary, change their skill set. But it's not to say that you should hide these toys from your kids. At Baby Lab, what we do is we take the batteries out and kids still come up with creative ways to play with this, but they're one, less annoying to the adults that work in the lab, and two, if a kid is mindlessly, repetitively doing the same thing over and over again, they're unlikely to be learning, right? You're not changing it up after a while. They may poke at something for a little while and then move on. Repetition is an important part of learning, but repetition like 20, 30 times is often just repetition for the sake of repetition. They're not necessarily learning. I hope that kind of makes sense. Ask questions if it doesn't. Let's see, what else can we go? So showed you some various toys. Let's go to, are there questions I should be answering? No, we're good. Okay. So some of the things that are fun for kids to play with is don't limit yourself to one type of toy, right? There's a variety of toys that are out there. There's musical toys. There's things that make noise. There's a variety of objects that they can play with. Often kids are pretty interested in cause-effect relationships. So there's times when they want to affect change. These are these little plastic things that kids can play with to push through and they make satisfying noises. These are things that can keep kids busy. So this does tend towards the repetition side of things. However, in life, as a parent who has many tasks, demands on their time, sometimes giving a kid a toy like this will keep them busy while you're trying to focus on getting through the line at the grocery store or finishing dinner or something along those lines. So it still keeps the kid present, but it also occupies them because there's times for learning and interacting and there's times for give mommy 5 minutes, give daddy 5 minutes and play with this toy. And they should be kids are really good at picking up what is a treat and gets a limited amount of attention versus what is a typical interaction or play period. So there are times that you need downtime and giving your kid a safe toy to play with that will keep them busy for 5 minutes so you can just finish a task is a great plan. So other things like this, causal toys are really good for kids in terms of this has wheels and it shows them that it can go back and forth. They'll do it on their leg in terms of like seeing it push on something. They can push it and watch it go away and then chase it. That will get them crawling at the younger ages. So again, toys that have multiple uses are the kinds of toys that you want to get kids involved with, because what's so fun about it is that you watch your kid change in how they interact with it from one day to the next. And so those things are fun. Again, music and sounds are always good things. Kids don't have to use the toys in the right way. If they're playing, you're good. So they might use the wrong end to play with it. You don't have to correct them. It's fine. That's them being creative in how they want to go after things. Here's the other thing too, is that when interacting with kids, there should be times where you want to teach them, but there's also should be a fair number of times where you let the kids lead. You say, what are you going to do with this? And you pour out a bunch of things. And just see what they do. Do they separate all the green ones and put them together and all the yellow ones and put them together and the red ones? Do they play games? Do they line them up? Let them lead and say, and then follow in on them. That joint attention thing happening again. So, oh, I see you're putting them in a line. Can I put them in a line too? So it's this idea of imitating what your kid does, interacting, repeating, labeling. These are situations where the kids are most likely to learn. Let me give you an example of something that we do at the lab sometimes to give you an idea of just recognizing the kinds of changes that kids have. So when you were putting your age in before, there were some people that said 2s and 3s, and so counting is a great game. A lot of kids naturally are encouraged to learn the counting game. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There is a long time, young kids can do the counting song, but they still don't know what the word 5 means. They have no idea what 5 is. And so one thing that's kind of interesting to see the difference between them is we have kids come in the lab, they proudly count up to 20, and then we play this game with them. We have a whole bunch of ducks. You don't have to do it with ducks. You can do it with pebbles. You can do it with forks, whatever you have around the house. But we say to the kid, if there was a kid seated right here, I'd be like, here's a whole bunch of ducks. Can you put 1 duck in the cup? And if the kid is 2 years of age, usually you can have 1 cookie, you can have 1 treat. They're pretty good with the word 1. So they might just go like this, and you'll go, great, is that 1? And they'll go, yep, it's 1. So great, this kid is what we call a 1 knower. Fantastic. Then you put this back, and you go, that's great. So can you now give me 2 ducks? What often happens with 2-year-olds, early 2s, is they'll go, yeah. They have no idea what 2 means. They know, some of them might know it's more. It's not 1, but they don't really know what it is. It takes about 6 months for a kid will know what 1 is, and then about 6 months later, they'll finally understand what 2 is. So if you say, can you give me 2 ducks? They'll go like this. They'll go like this. You say, is that 2? They'll look at it. They'll go, yeah, that's 2. Then you ask that kid, can you give me 3 ducks? And the kid will go, oh yeah. They put them all back in there. So they understand 1. They understand 2. It takes them still like another 3 to 4 weeks to learn 3. So that's kind of fascinating. And they do get it. But what's really neat about the developmental change is that it takes a long time to learn 1. It takes about 6 months to learn 2. It takes another few weeks to learn 3. But after they get 3 or 4, they get the rest of the system for free. It's like they get this insight of like, oh my gosh, that counting song, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, is actually related to like this. And then they will start counting everything. And you can do it in multiple languages. So they will, sit there, and it still isn't quite, fully developed yet. You could say to the kid, can you give me 5 ducks? And they take forever. They want to line the ducks up. It takes a lot of deep, patience to play this game, but they give you 5, and then you go, can you count those? And they go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then you go, how many are there? And they go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. it takes even a little while longer to understand that 5, the last number that they said, represents how many's in the set. So again, number knowledge, numeracy, math takes years to develop. But I encourage you to keep an eye out for little things like this where you can see them getting better at it. And so it's just sort of fun to see how smart they are and how it changes over time. There's a question.
Question about screen time.
Screen time. We always get the screen time question. Screen time is tough. So many societies still live and have lived without screens. We were not naturally evolved to deal with screens. However, in our society, screens are important. So screens are something that need to be negotiated. And so what you as a parent can do is learn to, or model behavior that you want to see, number 1. Number 2, learn and teach your child how to manipulate screen time. Because you're never gonna, it's really hard in today's society to bring up a child and not expose them to screens. You have a phone, I bet. You have screens in every public place that we go. It is not necessary, but it is ubiquitous. And so you're going to have to teach your child how to interact with screens in a responsible manner. So, number 1, I'll keep returning to this. Imitation is a strong, powerful learning mechanism. If you are absorbed on your screen, be it a phone, a computer, or a television, your child is picking up on that modeled behavior. I'm sorry, but it's true. So if you don't model the behavior you're going to want to see, your kid is going to pick up what you do. So describe to your kid that there are times where screens are okay and times when screens aren't okay. And like I said, it is no crime to want 10 minutes to yourself every once in a while. If your kid is kept happy by an iPad playing an educational game for 10 minutes, go for it. But always rate limit it. Time it. Let them know that it's a treat to have screen time. There are educational things out there. But again, just like playing with all these toys, if it is a repetitive task where it's a sound and it's clickbait for a kid, that's probably not a great learning environment. Is it a great way to give you 10 minutes to, get through eating a meal, taking a shower, whatever it is, keeping your kids safe long enough for you to complete another task? Fine. But manage screen time. The type of interactive and educational programs that are out there usually require the kid to be interacting with the screen or a parent to be interacting with the screen with the kid. And it's not unlike reading a book, right? So when you're interacting in an educational way with the screen environment, you're asking the kid questions, they're pointing, they're interacting with the stage. It's getting more difficult over time. It's meeting their challenges. Screens can be educational. There's still none of the data that I've seen provides a convincing situation where it's better than a live interaction. Is it a form of entertainment? Sure. Is it a great treat? Sure. But the message coming through is, we all know from COVID that learning online was not as effective as kids going to school.
So this question came from a mom. If we have no choice but to put a toddler in front of a screen, for example, she was recently home with the child was sick and she had to work from home for a few hours. Is there anything we would recommend? For example, watching Miss Rachel over watching cartoons?
Yeah. Again, so to repeat the question, it was, you're in a situation where you need to entertain get the kid. They're sick, you need to work from home, whatever. There's always going to be situations like that, and there's no reason to feel guilty about it. It's just do something that entertains the child. And what they find interesting one day will change the next day. So we can't give a hard and fast rule like, if this age, do this. But try to make it interactive, try to make it limited, and try to follow the kid's interest. And this is something that you're always going to have to manage. So, watching a video is not the worst thing that can happen to a kid. There is a plot line with cartoons, and kids go through stages where they want to see the same movie over and over and over again. And is that awful? No. Kids actually have pretty poor comprehension about plot lines in, various movies. So they do want to see it 50 times because they're actually learning new stuff every single time. It's the same reason they want to read the same book over and over and over again. It's not a bad thing. So if interactive is great, as far as educational is great. Things that don't seem to make a difference is if you're, exposing, kids don't learn foreign languages on TV. They just don't, like, if you're hoping to expose your kid to a language that you don't speak, it has to be, live interactions is how kids learn foreign languages. But whatever video it is that they find interesting for whatever time period that you need to get them to do is okay. But again, explain to the kids that this is special, this is a treat, we're not always going to do this. And a lot of times socially, you might be talking over their comprehension level, but they're going to get, one day they're going to figure it out. So be repetitive about this is a treat, we're not always going to do this, we're doing this for 5 minutes. 2-year-olds don't really have a great concept of the difference between 10 minutes and 15 minutes. They just don't. But use those term limits. Be like, oh, now it's over. I'm setting a timer. Bing, timer went off, TV's off, screen's off, those kinds of things. So set limits, and so that they understand that this is a negotiable thing. Any other questions about screens? Nope.
Not about screens.
What is it?
We had one saying, how do I know when to teach versus let my child discover a new skill like counting?
Oh, you don't. Sorry, but some days you will nail it and you should get an award on that day, and other days you're going to blow it and you don't get an award on that day. Or maybe you should get an award for blowing it. I don't know. But there's no right or wrong answer to that. Just doing a variety is good. There's no ratio that's exactly right. So just change it up every once in a while. You'll have a good, trust your own judgment on that. And because there's circumstances when you can let them lead, and there's circumstances where you absolutely can't. And so giving them the idea that those things change. So things that are negotiable. Should we go to the park or should we go to the garden? Maybe the kid can choose that one day. Things that are non-negotiable. Should we put our seatbelt on today? Like, non-negotiable. Doesn't matter. I don't care if you don't want to do it. I guess you'll just scream until I buckle you in. So kids have to understand, and you can explain to them while you're doing these things, even when they're super young, like 18 months, saying, I understand that you don't want to do this, but we have to do it right now. Just by you saying that out loud, one, I think helps the parent, but two, helps the kid understand. You may be talking over them and they don't totally get it, but they'll understand that, wow, she's speaking calmly and she's not listening to me screaming. And so that sends a message to the kid of like, this one's not a negotiation. And you don't have to be the perfect parent, right? No parent is. And kids have to understand that sometimes they get what they want and sometimes they don't. But the playful learning stuff is an opportunity for your, the reason I encourage it, one, it's great for kids, but two, it's great for parents, right? Because it's just great when your kid gives you this gift of showing how creative they are. Or if you see them doing pretend play and they're acting out the role of whatever family member it is that they decide to play, those are some of the most insightful things that you realize your kid is picking up information you had no idea about. And so it's exciting and it's wonderful to see the kids do this stuff. Another example that happened recently in the lab was that there was a kid here that had stranger anxiety. 9 months of age is round about the age when kids are becoming more socially sophisticated. They're starting to understand, wait, like, you're my primary caretaker. I've never seen you before. And they're understanding that if they are feeling insecure, they want to go to that primary caretaker and go away from the person that they don't recognize. This is social sophistication increasing. However, if you're that primary caretaker and they're having, stranger danger or anxiety being separated from you, it's a hard time to be a babysitter on that day. The primary caretaker feels great because they can solve all the problems, but it's also a burden too because they can't even go to the bathroom or something like that. So it's a tough couple of weeks to get through. But it is also, if you think about it in terms of this kid is getting more sophisticated and now they're understanding that this person is different than this person and this is my safe place and this I don't really know about yet. This is them learning. And so it makes it a little bit easier to deal with. It's still a tough time. Let me think about what other questions we got. What are some of the other things that we wanted to talk?
Preschoolers, how they learn, what are the fun and practical ways?
Fun and practical ways that preschoolers learn. So when people are trying to get school ready, it is, like I said, it's this, when you're learning maths, when you're learning numbers, when you're learning letters, there's so many different paths and kids are good at some aspects of it and not other aspects of it. Things that tend to be called school ready are a kid's ability to talk about the more difficult things to learn. So all things that are called ducks have things in common. They look like this. All things that are called chairs, people tend to sit on. They tend to have legs. They tend to have a surface to sit on. Those are called concrete nouns, and they tend to look perceptually similar. Those tend to be kids' first words, and it's because there's not much variation in how they're called. However, if you are trying to learn the word red, I could show you this, I could show you this, and I could show you this. These are all really different. So what's red? Well, red is a color, but it's a more abstract thing than labeling a duck. Things like colors, counting, you can count ducks, you can count ideas, you can count windows. These are using the word 1, 2, 3 to refer to really different things. So it's understandable that kids get pretty confused. Learning words, how to read, recognizing letters. These are all very arbitrary things. The letter A can be written in a variety of ways. I grabbed this book because it's a number book. So great. You want your kid to learn number? Fabulous. It's a great book. I mean, whether or not your kid likes it is actually all that really matters. But let's just look at, as literate adults, how really complex this is. This is the numeral one. This is the word one spelled out with letters. And this is one apple, right? And so as an adult, we look at this and we go, see, that's one. And the kid's like, what are you talking about? It's really complex if you think about it from the I don't know what numbers are level that your kid is approaching this book. So cut them some slack some days. And then as an adult, you're going to spend about 10 seconds on this page because it's just one. And you're going to go to this one. And now, oh my gosh, it's like a different color and a different squiggle. And now this one's got, 3 letters too. But this one's called 1 and this one's called 2. And now there's 2 B's. So, this is rough. So think about, if you're literate, we've automated reading. We think nothing of it. However, if you're not literate yet, it's super hard. And so I challenge you to be patient with your kids, but also to realize how really, really very hard this task is. And so expose them to numbers, expose them to letters. You're in the car driving, say, do you guys see a sign that has the letter A on it? And that will keep your kids busy for a while. They're looking around for the letter A. And then when they find it and point it out to you, go, great job. But also realize that some of these things that we totally take for granted are super hard for them to figure out. And then it makes it all the more amazing that they actually ever do learn these things. Another thing that's kind of tough for kids is squares, right? This is a square. This is also a square, but it's also a rectangle. But sometimes we call it a square too. So you can play games with kids. Again, it doesn't matter how much money you spend on toys. You can say in the grocery store, can you see something triangular? How many cans are stacked up on that shelf? And they can count these things. You can make fun out of any one of these environments. And once you set that kind of question and waiting for the answer in motion, the kids are going to start playing it with you. And they'll start asking questions. There's these great ages between like 3, 4, where they're pretty good at language. And they're going to start asking you a whole bunch of questions. And they're profound at times. And then there's other times where you can just sort of redirect and find something that they like. Some kids like dinosaurs. Some kids like mushrooms. Some kids follow whatever their interest is. And that's where you're letting them lead. And sometimes it's something that's very interesting to you too. Sometimes it's not so interesting to you. And so like you're somewhat in charge of where this stuff goes. But it is kind of fun to see what they find fascinating. And for anybody that has more than one kid, you know that the kids bring different things to the table. And so, so try to meet them where they're at. Yeah.
Is it true that positive, fun play activities speeds up brain growth and learning?
Is it true that positive, fun activities speed up brain growth? Yeah. Yes. I mean, technically, kids growing up, well, they did the study with rats, to be perfectly honest, but I think the brains are similar in this respect. If you have a deprived environment, a rat cage with absolutely no toys in it, the brain maturation is slower than one growing up in an enriched environment, and nobody's going to do that experiment on babies for ethical reasons. But if you take that deprived rat and then put it in the rich environment, they catch up, right? It's almost like being a preemie baby. Like technically, the preemie babies were, in the womb less long, and so they're a little bit delayed in those first couple weeks and months, but then they catch up. And so does that mean preemie babies are smarter because they got further faster? Because they catch up over time? There's so many different paths to development. Worrying about it like going faster is like, yes, you could bring, we all try to bring our kids up in enriched environments, and then they get a cold, and then they're like out for the count for 4 days, right? And so there wasn't a whole lot of learning going on those 4 days. Is that devastating to their development? No, there's lots of other things that happen. Kids go through growth spurts, and so they're focusing on walking and not doing much verbalization around a year. Both walking and first word tend to, on average, emerge around 12 months. However, if you've got a talker, they are not going to walk at 12 months. And if you have a walker, they're not the weeks that they're working on walking, they don't talk that much. So kids, you can kind of think of them as a limited budget, and where are they spending their budget this week, this month, is dependent on a whole bunch of different things happening. Are they going through a growth spurt, a motor development adjustment? Are they in a social situation that's highly challenging in a positive or negative, in an aggressive kind of way? Are they, having brain growth, myelinating the neurons in their brain? And so they're, focusing on learning more than they are on social development. All of these things mix, and usually any single behavior is motivated by several things. So for example, the onset of crawling, it's about whether or not you've got the muscle mass ratio right. Big babies crawl later, low center of gravity. They sit earlier. Long skinny babies crawl earlier. They've got the muscle to mass ratio to get their butt off the floor. Having a dog in either of those households causes crawling to happen earlier because they're trying to catch the dog. So again, the culture pushes things a certain way. The parents can foster certain stuff. Sorry, I'm not giving a very clear answer.
We can talk about the benefits of playful learning.
Okay, benefits of playful learning are, like I said, there's certain things like literacy and numeracy that take lots of trials. Count how many stairs there are in your house. How many stairs are there going up the slide? Can you sing a song and then can they make up a part? Or you leave out a word and you ask them to fill in the word. any of these activities will get them to practice numbers, colors, shape knowledge. These are all really important in terms of getting school ready, and prompting conversations that are fun, right? So getting out in nature. People often try to describe nature settings as nature caters itself to whatever the kid wants to do. Is the kid interested in looking at little moss growing, tiny little, trees? Or is the kid interested in playing in the puddle? Is the kid interested in climbing a tree and doing motoric challenges? So again, try to get them into a situation where they can go to a challenge that is the right flavor for them on that day in that setting. So this idea, but again, for the type of learning that takes multiple years to learn, writing, reading, math, make it fun to get in those things of how to count, how to recognize letters, because that's going to help them get to the next stage where they can recognize, if they're good at recognizing letters while driving around in the car and the teacher in school says, what letter is that? They're going to be primed and ready for that. So again, it's those kind of things. Here's another thing that's really fun to do with your kids. There's a game called Memory. Many variations of it exist. You can do it with a deck of cards, but you get, there's a deck of cards and there's pairs of objects in it. Like 2 rockets, 2 balls, 2 baseball bats, and the kids put the cards all face down. There is an age before kids are proficient at reading, but they're on their way, preschoolers, where kids are really good at memory and they will beat you. So I encourage you to get this game Memory. You can get it even on a computer app and things like that. But all the cards are face down and there's pairs in there. So you flip this one over and you flip this one over. It's not a match. So then it's your turn. And then you flip 2 over and then I flip 2 over and then I flip this one over. Oh, wait, I saw that one before. And I go over here and turn up, flip over the one and I get a match and I get to take those away. And that's my thing. It turns out that at about 3, 4, maybe 5, kids will beat parents at this. And at first, the kids are just infuriatingly nonchalant about it. They're like, oh yeah, Dune. And when they get 3 in a row, you're like, wait a minute, are you cheating? What's going on here? And part of it is that as adults, we write stuff down when we need to remember it. And our memory isn't as in shape as it was before we were literate. And so kids are somewhat illiterate because they haven't learned how to read yet. So their memory is awesome. And so I challenge you to play games like this with your kid because, again, they will impress you with their intelligence, and particularly because they're going to win. And that's great. There's nothing more fun than losing to your own child in a game like that, even when you're trying. So getting them school ready is about recognizing these abstract things like colors, numbers, and letters. It's also about understanding this negotiation that we've touched upon a variety of times now of there's certain settings where you have to do what I tell you to do because that's how we play this right now. And then there's other settings, recess, where you can be more playful and intuitive. And so getting kids to understand that there's a routine to things is going to help them get ready for school. And that's why preschool really helps kids with this, because if there's 10 kids in a room or whatever, they have to follow the rules. And so understanding that it's time to follow rules will help set them up to be more successful in school.
That's a question about separation anxiety or attachment question. So mom recently returned to work and the husband is now the primary caretaker. The baby is 10 months old and now baby strongly favors dad, crying even though mom is there. The question is this a normal phase?
Yep. All right, so there was a long question about strength or anxiety where the primary caretaker changed from mom to dad around kids around 10 months of age. And there's societies, kids can have multiple primary caretakers, and primary caretakers can change because kids are flexible. And so, yes, it's heartbreaking to have been the primary caretaker and then not be the primary caretaker anymore. However, It is social sophistication, and the kid will come around eventually. It is the kid, so that is natural part of attachment. Attachment relationships can change, and they usually just tend to develop more too. However, at the same time, kids are breathtakingly socially sophisticated too. So sometimes you feel guilty because you're no longer the primary caretaker. And so try to not let your kid manipulate you. Kids aren't particularly socially sophisticated to manipulate adults, but sometimes they do, and it's amazing. So it is kind of hard. There are times when the kids know how to pull your heartstrings, and they're being cared for, they are being fed, they are sleeping. Like, it's these things, these are the challenges that you just sort of deal with in terms of getting them to new environments. And so it's hard, but the kid is being cared for, there's competent adults involved, and there's days where you just feel terrible when they're not doing what they used to do, or you're not the superstar that you once were, and it'll get better, is all I can say. Think of it in terms of social sophistication. Kids can be distracted, so that when you're feeling bad because they're not coming to you, try to sit down with a book or do some task that you've done before with a kid where the kid knows the script, right? Bath time, or dinner time, or reading a book, or whatever, so that it gets off of whatever the downward spiral is of them getting upset for whatever the reason. You distract them, put them into a new script, and they're like, oh, I know how this goes. And then they'll quickly follow into that. And so good luck. It's not totally fun. There's days when you just can't, you don't win the negotiation, right? So the day the kid doesn't want to be in the car seat and you need to get someplace soon, you're like, well, I guess you're going to cry while we get you into the car seat. That's just how it's going to go. You're going to live, I'm going to live. This is how this goes down. So again, kids understand they have to learn that even though their wants and needs are not being met, acknowledge it to the kid. I'm really sorry that you're upset right now, but this is going down this way. Because at the end of the day, you are the adult in charge.
Another question about sleeping independently. How do we teach a 3-year-old to sleep by himself through the night and in a separate bedroom? So the situation is, she did sleep train him, but it went on a holiday.
Yep.
And everything is fine.
Oh yeah, I totally remember those days. It is hard to collect data when you're sleep deprived, but there is this field of psychology called behavior modification, positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and consistency are the ways through sleep training. And there's days, it's the kind of thing like you're on a great couple of weeks and then somebody gets a cold, or you go away on holiday, or you change time zones. Who knows what it is, but it throws them, and it just takes you a little while to get back. So again, kids are in the first weeks of life, pick up certain repetitive patterns of events, like bath time, or if there's a sequence of like, brush your teeth, go to bed, or read a book, brush your teeth, go to bed, or whatever those things are, those repetitive patterns, kids are really good at learning sequences of events. So whatever sequence you can set up and try to be consistent about with the kid so that they get back on track with the sleeping. There's all these other variables that are working against you. One, travel, but two, like if the kid is going through a growth spurt, their sleeping is disrupted. There's a variety of things. Just try to be consistent and try anything that works. But there's no one thing that goes back. For super young kids, there was a program called Milk, Mood, and Moon, which is that if you can get the kid to sleep, if you can get them to eat, if you can make sure mom's not postnatal depressed, if you can get that trifecta working, everything else seems to work out pretty well. But again, there's probably multiple factors going on, and that's why the kid's sleep is getting disrupted. Some of those factors you can control, some of those factors you can't control. Consistency is the name of the game, but also time, and just they get through it. It's tough, but try to set up routines so that the kid knows what's coming, and try, there's all of these different techniques that are out there. There's verberizing, there's, negative reinforcement, things like that. But you want the kid to have some locus of control so that when they wake up, they can self-settle and put themselves back to sleep. Another thing that happens, if you just look worldwide, a lot of the rest of the world sleeps with their kids. If that works for you, great. If that doesn't work for you, your culture, your in-laws, whatever, kids are flexible at the end of the day, but there's a variety of different techniques that are out there, and you just have to stick with whichever one works for you.
We have 2 more questions.
All right.
And we're getting towards the end.
An hour and a half in?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
So we've got 2 more, then we might have to wrap it up, I think. So we just have one asking about, is there any effective way of telling the difference between a child being understimulated or in an overstimulated state? And then we have a couple of questions about childcare.
Okay, so understimulated, overstimulated, I would say push the range with the kid. You don't want to, intentionally overstimulate a kid, but some days it's just the littlest thing overstimulates them. So there was an infant the other day that I went up to and said hello, and that was like, nope, that was too much. And so I backed away, right? So the kids sort of look at you and they look at you and you go, hi, how are you? And they're like, wah. Back away. I overstimulated the kid. Sorry. It's probably not too deleterious to the kid, but so you can get feedback from that kid. Some kids will just give you a look as a get away from me or I'm overstimulated. Some kids will scream at you. So there's a range of response in a certain kid too. So some kids are super quiet, some kids are super vocal. So yeah, there's sometimes that kids are outgoing and sometimes they're not. The question was like, I guess,
is there an effective way to telling the difference? Yeah.
Yeah, there's trial and error is my answer, which is sometimes you overstimulate them, sometimes you understimulate them and they fall asleep. We'll be doing tests in the lab and we're showing this like cute display and the kid's like, yeah, I'm gonna fall asleep now. They tend to fall asleep when they're bored and they tend to back off when they're overstimulated. And again, one kid may have very subtle responses and another kid may have a really loud, outgoing, easy to interpret response. But look for the signals from the kid. Are they open to it? Are they not? Posture, kind of eye contact or eye aversion is usually overstimulated. Those are the signals that I can come up with. It changes with age too, because they just have a larger repertoire the older they get. What was the other question?
Now we just have about childcare. What is the ideal age to send children to childcare? And is there an age that's too early?
Yeah. No, there's not an age that's too early. There is not an ideal age. It depends on, so the data on childcare is pretty clear. More than 50% of kids my numbers are US based, but I would imagine it's true in Australia as well. More than 50% of kids experience childcare before going to kindergarten. So there was government money thrown at figuring out whether or not this is detrimental to children, because it was extremely important to find that out. And it depends on how you define so the broad findings are, there is no test that we can come up with that differentiates home reared from high quality daycare, okay? So bad daycare is bad, but also a bad home environment is bad. So it sounds obvious, but it's a very complex question. What is daycare? Is daycare when there's 200 kids in a large facility? Is daycare when the person down the street has 5 kids that they take care of out of their basement? Is it daycare when they go to grandma's? It depends how you define those things. But in general, the government decided that, based on lots of research, that there's certain ratios of caretaker to children. So in the infant rooms, it's about 1 to 4, but by the time they're 4 years of age, it's 1 to 10. And that's because 4-year-olds are far more able-bodied than 6-month-olds. In general, they don't, daycare has legal requirements. There's, earlier than 6 weeks is, I think, the legal requirement in Australia. I'm not positive. It is in the United States at 6 weeks. But, so the ratios are dictated by the government because that was based on data. High quality daycare is usually defined as age-appropriate cognitive and social stimulation. So again, the social stimulation is how many kids are in a room, and the cognitive stimulation is the right kind of toys. So is it the kind of toys that, infants can manipulate certain toys but not other ones? 4-year-olds can, play more sophisticated games, more detailed fine motor skills and things like that. Low turnover rate at a preschool is also a good sign of a high quality preschool. Mm-hmm. It's going to be tricky to ask those questions explicitly, but a lot of people that know these data findings are putting that information on their websites. The other thing too is, again, this sounds like common sense, but it's also very predictive to be true. This is true. The data that I just shared with you is true of hundreds of thousands of children that were studied nationwide. You don't care about that level of knowledge, right? What you care about is your child okay in that daycare? So again, good daycare is good, bad daycare is bad. A lot of times the quality is good enough for that kid, and what determines it is if the caretaker, the parent or parents, are happy with the situation. People that are happy with the daycare tend to have kids that are happy at the daycare. If you, whatever it is that's setting off your triggers about the daycare, have concerns about the particular daycare that your child is at, it is less likely, your kid is also not going to like it. Therefore, it's knowing that it's possible that you just might have your kid in a daycare that has aggressive kids, or some combination of factors is such that it's not working out well for your kid. If you have the capacity to go to a different daycare, to maybe not, have your kid in daycare as many days a week or things like that, it's the fact that the parent who has the agency to change things when they don't like it is the key to success. Because if the parent is happy, usually the kid follows in. So it's not a one-size-fits-all answer. Anybody that's reading the news knows that there's some daycares out there that are doing some horrible things. It is not all daycares. It's very specific daycares. So hopefully you can keep your kids out of those daycares, but trust the parents' interaction with the situation. Also, when you are bringing your kid to the daycare, realize that as a parent, it's a learning curve, right? In some respects, nobody knows your child better than you do. However, daycare providers are also experts at their business. And so sometimes they say, your kid's causing a problem and this is unusual for kids of this age. And as a parent, it's really hard to take that feedback. So there's a learning curve for parents getting comfortable and getting used to dropping their child off at a care center. So there's a lot of factors at play. Try to figure out the ones that are causing positive or negative situations in your family situation. Because at the end of the day, you don't care about the macro level detail. You care about your kids in their current daycare situation. Might just be a teacher problem. So maybe changing them to a different room or a different preschool situation could alleviate. So sorry, I'm not giving you, there's no one single answer. I wish I could give you one if there was. But it's knowing if you can, the progress is usually in navigating what it is that you can change, because the kids are always changing. So is this a problem that's going to be true a month from now? Is it a bad month, or is it a bad situation that you want to remove them from?
Perfect.
How to make the children ready for childcare?
How to make them ready for childcare, get used to having a cold. So one of the things that happens when you expose your kid to childcare is that they tend to get sick more often. Now, you can either do this in the preschool years, or you can do this when they go to kindergarten, or whenever it is that you decide to release your child in the world. Colds, viruses get shared in communal settings. So it doesn't even have to be a daycare. You could go to your playgroup and the kid's going to be more likely to get sick at the playgroup. Or God forbid, should you have somebody visit your house and they bring in germs from the outside world. So illness happens, you'll get through it. And like my son was in preschool early, and we had a cold for I think 2 years. It just kept on going around all of us. And then, but let me tell you, he got to kindergarten and there wasn't a single germ that could knock that kid down. He didn't miss a day of school for years. So you pay your dues at somewhere. Other things that happen with kids and getting them ready for preschool is getting them talking about what happens during the day. Because you want to know, like, yes, you get all these details from, they give parents so much details after school these days, but you want to hear it from your kid. So this is teaching your kids storytelling. You want to hear, practice at home about, well, did you tell Daddy what we did at the park today? Did you tell, and get them used to telling stories so that you understand whether or not they get the stories right or not, right? So you go to the park with them in a day, get them to tell some other family member what happened at the park. And there's hopefully trust among all of you. The facts are right or the facts are not right. But storytelling is a skill and kids have to get trained on it. So train them up on telling you how their day was. That's going to make you feel better about their daycare situation, and you get to hear things that aren't in all the forms and documents that you get from the care center. All right.
Amazing. All right.
Let me do one last commercial at the end, which is we are Baby Lab. We are funded by government money. We are mandated to share our knowledge with people like you, the public. However, our data also depends on parents being interested in the things that I'm saying and coming to us to participate in our research things. So please think about signing up for a study at Baby Lab so we can tell you more things about what we're learning these days. So thank you all for listening.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Susan. That was absolutely fantastic information. You covered so many topics in that time, and you filtered through the questions just so easily, being able to respond to people's thoughts and questions, and still being able to share so many strategies. That was so practical and easy for people to go away and start implementing even from this afternoon. So we appreciate your time and your knowledge and your expertise, because it is absolutely exactly the information that parents, first-time parents, second-time parents, grandparents are just craving to know. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'm going to
it's
just
a pleasure.
share.
Also, can we share that we are open to feedback on this? This was a trial run, so please let us